Archaeological evidence of prehistoric human settlement on the island of Sardinia is present in the form of nuraghes and others prehistoric monuments, which dot the land. The recorded history of Sardinia begins with its contacts with the various people who sought to dominate Western Mediterranean trade in Classical Antiquity, Phoenicians and Romans, initially under the political and economic alliance with the Phoenician cities. It was colonized and then conquered by Rome during the First Punic War, after the island was included for centuries in the Roman province of Corsica. Sardinia, included in 3rd and 4th centuries in the Italia suburbicaria diocese. In the early Middle Ages, through barbarian movements, the waning of the Byzantine Empire influence in the Western Mediterranean and the Saracen Raids, the island fell out of the sphere of influence of any higher government. This led to the birth of 4 kingdoms called Judicati in the 8th through 10th centuries. Falling under papal influence, Sardinia became the focus of the rivalry of Genoa and Pisa, the Judicati and the Crown of Aragon, which eventually subsumed the island as a kingdom of Sardinia in 1324. The kingdom was to last until 1718, when it was ceded to the Piedmontese House of Savoy. Later, in 1861, it would thus become the Kingdom of Italy and finally in 1946 the Italian Republic. Prehistory. The oldest trace in Sardinia of the anthropomorphic prehistoric primate called Aureopithecus bamboli is dated to 8.5 million years ago. In 1996 a hominid fingerbone, dated up to 250.00 BC, was found in a cave in the Lagudoro region. Modern humans appeared in the island during the Upper Paleolithic. A phalanx dated to 18,000 BC had been found in the Corbedu cave near Uliana. Mesolithic human remains had been discovered at Sucularu cave of Leru. Already in the Stone Age, Monte Arci played an important role. The old volcano was one of the central places where obsidian was found and worked for cutting tools and arrowheads. Even now the volcanic glass can be found on the sides of the mountain. The Neolithic began in Sardinia in the 6th millennium BC with the cardial culture. Later, important cultures like the Osieri culture and the Arzachena culture of the late Neolithic and the Abele Zoophilagosa and Monte Claro culture of the Chalcolithic period, developed in the island contemporaneously with the appearance of the megalithic phenomenon. The dolmens culture around the end of the 3rd millennium BC, passed with other typical material aspects of Western Europe through by the Sardinian coast even in Sicily, and from there all over Mediterranean basin. Prehistoric and pre-Nuragic monuments and constructions that characterize the Sardinian landscapes of the Domus-de Janas. The statue menhir in the dolmens. Chronology of pre-Nuragic Sardinia. Archaeological cultures of Sardinia in the pre-Nuragic period. Cardium pottery. A Philistru culture. Bonuainu culture, Sansariaco culture, Osieri culture, Abele Zoophilagosa culture, Monte Claro culture, Belbica culture, Bonanaro culture. Nuragic period. Bronze Age Sardinia is characterized by stone structures called nuraghes, of which there are more than 8,000. The most famous is the complex of Baramini in the province of Medio Campidano. The nuraghes were mainly built in the period from about 1800 to 1200 BC, though many were used until the Roman period. Characteristics of this period are also the Holy Well temples, the Megara temples and the giants' graves. The Nuragics also produced a vast collection of bronze statuettes and the so-called giants of Montprama, perhaps the first anthropomorphic statues of Europe. It is known that the Sardinians had contact with the Mycenaeans, who traded with the Western Mediterranean. contact with powerful cities of Crete, such as Kydonia, is clear from pottery recovered in archaeological excavations in Sardinia. The alleged connection with the Sherdan, one of the sea peoples who invaded Egypt and other areas of eastern Mediterranean, has been supported by Professor Giovanni Ugas from the University of Cagliari. This hypothesis has been, however, opposed by other archaeologists and historians. The name Sardinia could result from that of Sardus, a mythological hero of the Nuragic pantheon. Early in Classical Antiquity, Phoenician settlement from the 8th century BC, Phoenicians founded several cities and strongholds on the south and west of Sardinia such as Tharos, Bithyia, Sulci, Nora and Corallus. The cities were built on strategic points, often peninsulas or islands near estuaries, easy to defend and natural harbors. Recent studies seems to indicate that the majority of these cities were inhabited by the indigenous Nuragic population, while the Phoenician element was probably restricted to the elite. The Phoenicians came originally from what is now Lebanon and founded a vast trading network in the Mediterranean. Sardinia had a special position because it was central in the western Mediterranean between Carthage, Spain, the River Rhone and the Etruscan civilization area. The mining area of the Aglasiant was important for the metals lead and zinc. After the Phoenicians, the Carthaginians took over control in that part of the Mediterranean. Around 550 BC, they expanded their influence to the western and southern coast from Boza to Corallus, consolidating a large number of Phoenician colonies all over the western Mediterranean under one empire for the first time. The cities were administered by plenipotentiaries called suffetes, which stressed the growing of grain and cereals. Roman Empire. In 240 BC, in the course of the First Punic War, the Carthaginian mercenaries on the island revolted and gave the Romans, who some years earlier had defeated the Carthaginians in the naval battle of Sulci, the opportunity to land on Sardinia and occupy it. In 238 BC, the Romans took over the whole island without meeting any resistance. They took over an existing developed infrastructure and urbanized culture. Along with Corsica, it formed the province of Corsica e Sardinia under a praetor. Together with Sicily, it formed one of the main granaries of Rome until the Romans conquered Egypt in the 1st century BC. A revolt, led by two Sardo-Punic nobles, Hamsicera and his son, broke out after the crushing Roman defeat at Cannae. A Roman army of 23,000 men, under Titus Manlius Torquatus, met the Carthaginian Sardinian allied forces in the south of the island, defeating them and killing 12,000 men. Another major revolt took place in 177–176 BC when the Balaires and the Ilienses were defeated by Tiberius Gracchus the Elder, who killed or enslaved about 80,000 natives. The so-called Sardipoliti living in the impervious mountains of the interior resisted the Roman colonization for more than a century. Marcus Caecilius Metellus subduing them only in 127 BC. Under Roman domination, Latin became the speech of the majority of the inhabitants, ultimately developing into the modern Sardinian language. The Punic culture remained very strong under the Romans until the 1st centuries AD. Tharos, Nora, Bithyia, Antas and Monte Sarai are now important archaeological monuments where architecture and city planning can be studied. During the Roman period, the geographer Ptolemy noted that Sardinia was inhabited by the following tribes, from north to south: the Tibulati and the Corsi, the Coracenses, the Carenses and the Cunusatani, the Salsitani and the Luswadanenses, the Isaranenses, the Ichilinenses Saracens, the Rucensi, the Salsitani and the Corpicenses, the Scapitani and the Siculensi, the Neapolitani and the Valentini, the Solsitani and the Noritani. In the year 212 A.D., every inhabitant of the empire, and all Sardinians as well, became Roman citizens by the Constitutio Antoniniana, better known as the Edict of Caracalla. At that time most of Sardinians, as members of the Municipia and Coloniae, were already Roman citizens, with the probable exception of the mountain inhabitants of Barbagia. During the empire of Diocletianus, around the year 286 A.D., Sardinia was included in the Italiciana diocese, and under the rule of the Emperor Constantine the Great, year 324 A.D., in the Italiciana suburbicaria diocese, until the conquest by the Vandals in 456 A.D. Middle Ages. Vandals, Goths and Byzantines. After the fall of the Western Roman Empire, Sardinia was subject to several conquests. In 456, the Vandals, an East Germanic tribe, coming from North Africa, occupied the coastal cities of the island. The Vandals imposed garrisons guarded by African auxiliaries, like the Maori. In 533, Sardinia rebelled under the Vandal governor Godas, a Goth, who proclaimed himself Rex of Sardinia. In 534 the small Vandal forces arrived in Sardinia to stifle the Godas' rebellion, surrendered immediately to the Byzantines when faced with news of the Vandal collapse in Africa. Thenceforth the island was part of the Byzantine Empire, included as a province in the Praetorian Prefecture of Africa. The local governor sat in Caralis. During the Gothic Wars much of the island fell easily to the Ostrogoths, but the final fall of the Germanic resistance in mainland Italy reassured Byzantine control. In that year Sardinia was included in the Exarchate of Africa until its end by the Arabs in 700 A.D. One of the few ethnic Sardinians known from this period was Ospitone, a leader of the Barbaricanos. According to the Pope Gregory I's letters, in the island coexisted a Romanized and Christianized area within the interior, pagan or semi-pagan cultures. The ruler of one of the latter, Ospitone, converted to Christianity in 594 after a diplomatic exchange. Christianization, however, remained for long influenced by Eastern and Byzantine culture. Saracen Raids starting from 705 to 706, the Saracens from North Africa harassed the population of the coastal cities. Details about the political situation of Sardinia in the following centuries are scarce. Due to Saracen attacks, in the 9th century Tharos was abandoned in favor of Oristano, after more than 1,800 years of occupation. Caralis, Porto Torres and numerous other coastal centers suffered the same fate. There was news of another massive Saracen sea attack in 1015–16 from Balearics, led by Mujahid al-Amiri. The Saracens' attempt of invasion of the island was stopped by Sardinian Judicati with the support of the fleets of the maritime republics of Pisa and Genoa, called by Pope Benedict VIII. Judicati. From the mid-11th century the Judicati appeared. The title of Judex was an heir of that of the Byzantine governor after the creation of the Exarchate of Africa in 582. In the 8th and 9th centuries the four parties depending from Caralis grew increasingly independent, the Byzantines being totally cut off from the Tyrrhenian Sea by the Muslim conquest of Sicily in 827. A letter from Pope Nicholas I in 864 mentions, for the first time, the Sardinian judges, their autonomy now clear in a later letter by Pope John VIII, which defined them as princes. A letter by Misko I to Pope John XV proves that the Judicati were known even in Poland. and that they played a prestigious role in medieval Europe. At the dawn of the judicial era, Sardinia had some 330,000 inhabitants, of which 120,000 were free. These were subjected to the authority of local curators, in turn subjected to the judge. The church was also powerful, and at this time it had completely abandoned the Eastern Rite. The late 11th century arrival of Benedictine, Camaldolese and other monks from the Italian Mezzogiorno, Lombardy and Provence, especially the monasteries of Monte Cassino, St. Victor de Marseille and Vallombrosa, boosted the agriculture in a land which was extremely underdeveloped. The condaffers of the monasteries, which record property transactions, are an important source for the study of the island and its language in the 11th and 12th centuries. Evidence from the condaffers of San Pietro di Silci in Sassari, and Santa Maria di Bonicardo concerning the children of slaves has been adduced to show that differences in agricultural lifestyles between regions may affect the survival rate of females, hypothetically through increased infanticide of baby girls. The Abbacy of Santa Maria di Bonicardo contained more central, upland regions where a pastoral economy dominated and women were less economically useful. Among children in that region, sex ratios are highly skewed in favor of men. On the other hand, in the region of San Pietro di Silci, less pastoral child sex ratios are not skewed abnormally. There were 5 judicati: Agustra, Logudoro, Cagliari, Arborea and Gallura. Agustra was early on absorbed by Cagliari, and Arborea and Logudoro were united for a time in the 11th century. The initiatives of the Gregorian reformers led to greater contact between Sardinia and the Italian peninsula, especially through the desires of the judges to establish monasteries with monks from continental monasteries at Monte Cassino and Marseille. By the 12th century, the Sardinian judicati, though obscure, are visible through the mists of time. They professed allegiance to the Holy See, which put them under the authority of the Archdiocese of Pisa, superseding the ancient primacy of the Archdiocese of Cagliari on the island. Often quarreling between one another, the judicati made a great number of commercial concessions to the Pisans and the Genoese. The Republiche Maronnaise soon became the true masters of the Sardinian economy. In the late 12th and early 13th centuries, all 4 judicati passed to foreign dynasties and the local families were relegated to minor positions. Arborea passed to the Catalan House of Savoy in 1185, though this was contested for the next few decades. In 1188, Cagliari was conquered by the House of Massa from the Republic of Pisa. Gallura became by marriage minus it had been inherited by a woman, Elena minus a possession of the House of Visconti, another Pisan family. In 1207, only Logudoro survived to the end under local Sardinian rulers. However, its end was early. It passed to Genoa and the Doria and Malaspina families in 1259 after the death of its last judge, Adelasia. Only a year after the others, judicati and the Pisans besieged Santa Igia and deposed the last ruler of Cagliari, William III. Gallura survived longer, but the enemies of the Visconti in Pisa soon removed the last judge, Nino, a friend of Dante Alighieri, in 1288. About the same time, Sassari declared itself a free commune allied to Genoa. In the early 14th century, much of eastern and southern Sardinia was under the authority of Pisa and of the Deligariadesca family. Arborea, however, survived as the only indigenous kingdom until 1420. The most remarkable Sardinian figure of the Middle Ages, Eleanor of Arborea, was co-ruler of that region in the late 14th century. She laid the foundations for the laws that remained valid until 1827. The Carta-del-Lagu, Kingdom of Sardinia, Kingdom of Sardinia in the Crown of Aragon and in the Spanish Empire. In 1323 an Aragonese army, under Alfonso, son of King James II, disembarked near Iglesias in southern Sardinia. The Pisans intervened but were defeated both by land and sea, and were forced to leave the island, maintaining only the castle in Corrali until 1326. The Cagliari area as well as Scalura thus became part of the first nucleus of the Kingdom of Sardinia, established nominally by Pope Boniface VIII in 1297, that was included in the Crown of Aragon. In 1353 Marianus IV of Arborea, allied with the Doria family, waged war against the Aragonese, defeating them at Decimum and besieging Sassari, but unable to capture Cagliari. The Peace of Sandlari ushered in a period of tranquility, but hostilities were resumed in 1365, with Arborea led by Marianus IV and then, from 1391, by Brancaleone. Doria, initially able to capture much of the island. However, in 1409 the Aragonese crushed Genoese fleet coming in support the Sardinians, and destroyed the Judical army at the Battle of Sandlari. Oristano, the Arborean capital, fell on the 29th of March 1410. William II of Narbonne, the last Judice of Arborea, sold his remaining territories to the Aragonese in 1420, in exchange for 100,000 florins. The loss of the independence, the firm Aragonese rule, with the introduction of a sterile feudalism, as well as the discovery of the Americas, provoked an unstoppable decline of Sardinia. In the 1470s an important revolt against the Aragonese was led by Leonardo Alagón, Marquesses of Oristano, who managed to defeat the viceroyal army but was later crushed at the Battle of Macama, ending any further hope of independence for the island. The unceasing attacks from North African pirates and a series of plagues further worsened the situation. In 1566 the first typography of Sardinia was established in Cagliari, while in 1607 and 1617 were founded the University of Cagliari and the University of Sassari. In the late 15th and in the early 16th century the Spaniards built watchtowers all along the coast to protect the island against Ottoman incursions. In 1637 a French fleet led by Henry, Count of Harcourt, sacked Oristano for about a week. Kingdom of Sardinia under the House of Savoy. Sardinia was disputed between 1700 and 1720. After the War of the Spanish Succession it was assigned to Emperor Charles VI in 1714. Philip V of Spain briefly recovered the island in 1717, but in 1720 the European powers assigned Sicily to Charles VI and Sardinia to the House of Savoy. Sir Vittorio Amadeo II became the King of Sardinia. In 1793 Sardinians defeated twice the French invaders. On 23 February 1793, Domenico Migliore, in command of the Sardinian fleet, defeated near the Maddalena archipelago the fleets of the French Republic, which was included with the rank of lieutenant, the young and future Emperor of France Napoleon Bonaparte. Migliore received the first gold medal of military valor of the Italian Navy. In the same month, Sardinians stopped the attempted French landing on the beach of Cortu Sant'Elena, near the capital of Cagliari. Because of these successes, the representatives of nobility and clergy formulated 5 requests addressed to the King Victor Amadeus III of Sardinia in order to have the same rights as the Italian mainlanders, but they met with a refusal. Because of this discontent, on the 28th of April 1794, during an uprising in Cagliari, 2 Piedmontese officials were killed. That was the start of a revolt all over the island, which culminated in the expulsion of the officers for a few days from the capital Cagliari. On the 28th of December 1795, insurgents in Sassari demonstrating against feudalism, mainly from the region of Logudoro, occupied the city. On the 13th of February 1796, in order to prevent the spread of the revolt, the Viceroy Filippo Vivaldi gave to the Sardinian magistrate Giovanni Maria Angioi the role of altonos, which meant a substitute to the Viceroy himself. Angioi moved from Cagliari to Sassari, and during his journey almost all the villages joined the uprising, demanding an end to feudalism and aiming to declare the island to be a republic. But once he was outnumbered by loyalist forces, he fled to Paris and sought support for a French annexation of the island. In 1799, King Charles Emmanuel IV was ousted from Piedmont by the French army, and moved his court to Cagliari. At the end of the 18th century, the universities of Sassari and Cagliari were restored. In 1823, Victor Emmanuel I issued the Editto del Chiudent, a legislative act that abolished all community latifunders, introducing the private property and provoking heavy protests from Sardinians. In 1847, under King Charles Albert, with the so-called perfect fusion, were abolished all the administrative differences between Sardinia and the Italian mainland. This maneuver has been made it out to be the only one possible in order to grant equal rights to all inhabitants of the kingdom, that would become a unitary state and the basic legislation of the future united Italy as well. In 1820, the Savoyards imposed the Enclosures Act on the island, aimed at turning the land's traditional collective ownership, a cultural and economic cornerstone of Sardinia since the Nuragic times, to private property. This gave rise to many abuses, as the reform favored the landholders while excluding the poor Sardinian farmers and shepherds, who witnessed the abolition of the communal rights and the sale of the land. Many local rebellions, like the New Orisuconotto riot in 1868, all repressed by the king's army, resulted in an attempt to return to the past and reaffirm the right to use the once common land. New infrastructures were built under King Carlo Felice. The main road from the south to the north was enhanced. Also, the first ferry route between the island and Genoa was established, using steamboats such as the Galnara. The first railway was inaugurated in 1871. By the end of the 19th century, the Royal Railways had received 30 locomotives, 106 passenger cars, and 436 cargo cars. New urban plans and new villages were realized. They often followed the urban model of Turin, which now was the capital of the reign of Italy. The economy was focused mainly on the primary sector and on mining. The majority of mining societies operating in Sardinia depended on non-Sardinian capital money. However, in 1848 the Sardinian entrepreneur Giovanni Antonio Sanna achieved the property of the mine of Montevecchio, thus becoming the third richest man of the kingdom.